Hi there, I'm Ella Sipka, and this is the Apatros Review. Now, before I go on with this episode, I have to say that due to the fact that I'm shooting this on my emergency backup phone, which is a VPhone Moon 820, so the sound picture quality will be lesser than what I had in my previous videos. And of course, actually earlier today I managed to buy a new phone, and it's going to take a few days to come. So I'm going to have to do both halves of the D Spectrum 14 on this phone. Anyway, sorry about that. I delayed this as long as I could. Anyway, now this episode, this is the first half of the D Spectrum 14, which is that perennial special I do every 25 episodes to focus on the crap I saw over those preceding 25 episodes. As always, I need to explain that the films covered in the special are all grade over grade that falls within the lowest three levels of my grading ladder. These are D+, 3 out of 10. I use these for works that are disappointingly mediocre. Although they're not unwatchable, just usually only the fans of such works will appreciate them. Then there's a D, which is a 2 out of 10, for works that are roundly bad, having no style, technical prowess, or competency to them, and which are only recommended to masochists and die-hard fans. And then there's a D-, 1 out of 10, which is for the worst of the worst. Those works are slapped with a D-, not fit for viewing by anyone, except for the most hardcore bad movie masochists. Anyway, let's start, shall we? First up, we have Legion of the Dead, which is directed by Olaf Interback in the year 2001. I gave this one a D-. It's atrocious. A pair of stoners, a friendly female immortal, two ridiculously inept hitmen who spend their time arguing about the color of their suits, the seriously evil bloke they're working for, and a psychotic serial killer all meet up in a remote small-town bar where the retired cousin of all bar and brawls takes place in. Shot by German underground hackmeister Olaf Ittenbach, who later provided makeup effects for the Uwe Boll videogame adaptation Blood Rain, this stupidly ugly and spectacularly moronic attempt at Tarantino's horror flick gives you a good indication of its low IQ when the film starts with the two protagonist stoners having a 3/4-hour discussion about genitals, all the while being stoned out of their fucking minds. Atrocious stuff. If you're after this film, you'd best track down the director's cut, which is pretty rare, as nearly all prints of the film and release have been seriously truncated gore effects. Hell Asylum, directed by Danny Draven in the year 2002. I gave this one a D. It's bad. Having just succeeded in convincing an investor friend into financing its new concept for a reality TV show called Shield Challenge, sort of like a fictional version of Fear Factor, but without the proper resources, struggling TV producer Max invites 5 girls, one of whom is also his girlfriend, to the show's pilot. The premise of the show is simple. The girls will stay overnight in an abandoned asylum that was built by a notorious sadist who had 5 wives reputed to be experimented on, the aim of the game being to face their fears and several challenges staged for each of them. The last person standing will win $1 million. But once the show starts and the girls are locked in the asylum, the undead wives return to kill everyone in the building. Joining the ranks of a number of horror films at the time that tried to set up the reality TV show phenomenon at the time, and we have films like Halloween Resurrection, Series 7 The Contenders, Death on Demand, My Little Iron Cruel World, and many others, and I'll review all of those films in the future. This ultra-cheap full moon direct-to-video feature from this side of the millennium is pretty damn bad. And the thing about Full Moon was many of their direct-to-video films in the early 2000s had really low budgets, like really cheap. Of course, their works have the budgets have gone a little bit better over the past 10 years, but in the early 2000s, Full Moon films were stupidly cheap. Now, Draven, who started as an editor and director of photography for the likes of David Dakota, has no skilled, competent filmmaking basics. He seems to be of the horror hipster set, the type of filmmaker who grew up watching classic horror films but learned nothing from the experience, instead thinking that simply picking up a digital camcorder and shooting in abandoned locations without the necessary essentials for a convincing horror film, or for somehow having the budget to make cheap gore effects, which was a consistent attribute for these D-grade productions, and using irritating camera angles and motion snaps that would make even the MTV-style directors of the realm a few years before shaking their hands in disgust. There have been some surprises in this field over the past 20 or so years, but Draven isn't capable of making that kind of thing. At the end of the day, an ultra-cheap and utterly tawdry horror stand-up of the then current and utterly obnoxious reality TV trend, something that actually pretty much died out. Actually, it was pretty much decimated in the past half-decade. Made for those millennial hipsters who have learned nothing from the genre films of the past. Now, for the only game I reviewed in the past 25 episodes, Quest for Insane. This is made by Patrol Entertainment in 2002. It's a DOS PC game. Now, I gave this one a D+. It's disappointing. Now, this was the sequel to Quest for Al-Qaeda, The Hunt for Bin Laden, a built-engine game made in the aftermath of September 11 and the Afghanistan War by a patriotic American modder, who decided to do his duty in releasing what was essentially a propaganda exercise where the player hunts down terrorists and goes up against Osama bin Laden at the end. As for this sequel, which was later remade with a different engine under the title Quest for Saddam, which was itself stolen by an Al-Qaeda propaganda unit, that changed some details, added the soundtrack of Islamic Nasheed, and released it for free as neither Bush Capturing or Quest for Bush. Now, as for Quest for Hussein, Petrilla makes another 6-level single-episode game where you play an unnamed American soldier, fighting your way through Iraqi mooks in a quest to take down Saddam Hussein. Not the worst first-person shooter game out there, and having some playability to it at times, probably because the build engine is pretty much versatile and that sort of thing, but ultimately nothing more than a quickie that hasn't aged that well given the public perception has changed on the circumstances that led to the Iraq War. Triloquist, directed by Mark Jones in 2008. Give this one a D, it's bad. After their mother, a struggling Las Vegas ventriloquist, dies of a drug overdose in 1993, two young children and their mother's ventriloquist dummy, that might somehow be alive, are sent from foster home to foster home until their perverted uncle is found. He puts them through hell, but they pay him back in kind by murdering him, forcing the siblings, raging psychopath Angelina, her withdrawn younger brother Norbert, and their pet dummy, to go on the run, undertaking a violent road trip to their destiny in Las Vegas, leaving a long trail of mutilated bodies in their wake. Angelina also wants her brother to have a baby, so to that end she kidnaps a young woman to serve as a surrogate mother. Triloquist has the germ of a good idea in it, the age-old horror trope of the living ventriloquist dummy. Bruce White really gets into the role of an enthusiastic relish here. In fact, the dummy is pretty much the only character you'll be sympathetic to. But Jones' decision to stage this as a very acerbic dark comedy doesn't exactly work, due to the utter lack of boundaries Jones had in the script. With the story having things like child abuse, incest, teenage drug use, and alcoholism in there, without having the right context to make it work, it winds up being a film that thinks it can be an edgelord and direct-to-video horror genre, but only winds up leaving viewers with one hell of a nasty sour taste in their mouths. Mark Jones had reached his horror genre zenith for Leprechaun. That's right, the same guy who made Leprechaun made Triloquist. But here only manages to ruin a potentially decent concept with an unsustainable level of acidity and nastiness. Now, Black Dragons, directed by William Nye in the year 1942. Gave this one a D+. It's disappointing. The third entry in the infamous Monogram 9, Bela Lugosi does the only spy thriller in his career. By this point he was already addicted to morphine and was gripped by a bad case of chronic arthritis, but being the professional he was, he never let it sap his energy. As a German nationalist plastic surgeon who was sent to Japan by the Austrian painter, as a personal favor to the Japanese emperor to use his skills and talent of plastic surgery to disguise 6 members of the shadowy Japanese group of the Black Dragons into the identities of 6 American businessmen affiliated with the U.S. wartime industry who had been kidnapped by the group and murdered, but had their heads preserved by plaster death masks before their bodies disposed of. After successfully completing the 6 plastic surgeries, the leader of the Black Dragons double-crosses the doctor, putting him in a jail cell, leaving him dead to rot, while the 5th columnists, which is what the old-timers refer to insider agents performing sabotage on the home soil of the enemy nation, go ahead to replace their target's place, even wearing the same clothes the targets wore before they were killed. But the Dragons fucked up big time. In the same cell as the Doctor is a man who turns out to be the Doctor's identical double. How's that for a coinky dink? So the Doctor simply switches places with the prisoner. I'm guessing he removed his goatee and planted it onto the cellmate double before sneaking out of the prison cell, and follows his prey to the states where he enters the household of one of the agents under an assumed identity and performs the trademark Lugosi hypnotism magic on the first subject, and uses him to lure the other agents out of the target, agents out of the shadows, and ice them off one by one, under the motive of simple revenge. Fury be damned. The agents have very little idea they're going to be used as examples for the Americans to learn about the dangerous espionage efforts of the Imperial Japanese. Now, this film was produced by Monogram as a quick effort at producing propaganda to do their bit at supporting the US's wartime effort. For a little historical context, about 4 months before, the United States had suffered a massive attack by the Imperial Japanese Navy at Pearl Harbor, forcing the Americans into World War II. Once that happened, everyone in Hollywood started making propaganda films to boost their citizens' support for the war effort, and Monogram quickly joined the cause. As a result of going into this rather quickly, the film was something of a rush production, but Monogram didn't exactly do an atrocious job at this. Black Dragons isn't even the worse than Monogram 9. That dubious honor goes to both The Ape Man and Return of the Ape Man, which were both worse than this one. Although the film feels confusing at times, today's viewers might not understand the full way of the story. The Ape Man, directed by William One-Shot Bodine, 1943. Give this one a D, it's bad. In this 6th entry in the Monogram 9, Bela Lugosi plays an ill-lucked scientist named James Brewster. Why is he ill-lucked, you say? Well, in his research into hormone gland therapy, or something along those lines, the dodgy science in these 1940s cheapies tends to be something of an utter joke, he's made some discoveries that could potentially benefit humanity. or at the very least give the US Army something on edge in the war going on at the time. But in trying to prove his discoveries, he accidentally injects himself with hormones taken from a captive gorilla he keeps in a caged cell in his basement, causing him to transform into a human-gorilla hybrid. Of course, with a film that uses an actor in a cheap and hilariously unconvincing Hollywood gorilla suit to play the gorilla, the effects here simply equate to Lugosi having yak hair glued onto his cheeks and a pretty bad wig on his head. And no, they did not use gorilla glue. Despite being a gorilla-human hybrid, Bruce still has most of his intelligence intact, in enough sense to spend half his days stuck in a caged cell with his captive gorilla friend. So he spends his remaining time trying to figure out an antidote into reversing his transformation. He eventually figures out that the human spinal fluid can be crucial in getting him back to his old human self, but the only downside of that is that he needs to kill his victims to harvest the spinal fluid. I remember another horror film that tried something like that. It was what, Scared to Death in 1980? Brewster tries to find the ethical way to source the stuff he needs, but when a pesky snooping reporter intervenes in his quest, things start to go horribly wrong. You've got to feel sorry for poor old Bella. By this point, he was pretty much accepting any job he can get in order to get the drug money he so desperately needed for his raging addiction to morphine, and some other stuff as well. A popular rumor these days claims that Lugosi was apparently quaffing formaldehyde, because it was the only stuff that still had an effect on him. Poor bastard. Anyway, here in his sixth film for Monogram, and he actually had like a 9-picture deal Monogram, which supplied him with the drug money he needed. This was the first one to be directed by legendary hack director William One-Shot Bodine, who got his nickname for his habit of only needing a single take for each scene, thus saving the studios a lot of time and money at the trade for quality. The lack of polish due to Bodine's style went a fair way to rendering whatever negligible atmosphere this film might have had potentially basically cancelled out, and a strange fourth-wall-breaking mysterious character who shows up from time to time, predicting events just about to happen with unerring accuracy, who in the film's final moments reveals himself to be the film's writer, cranking up the car's window with the words "The End" painted on it. It's probably the strangest thing I've ever seen in a 1940s movie. Okay, that's it for the first half of the D-Spectrum 14. I'll cover the rest of the crappy films in the next episode. Hope you guys are staying safe. Now, I do not do requests, but if you have any questions about films or DVDs in general, just hit me up in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer. Alright, see you guys in the next half of the D-Spectrum 14.